And Ruby Sue says she's on her way. She's stuck in transit.
On
Ruby
the
Sue.
train.
On the train, yeah, she's,
Yeah.
traveling.
Dude, I got 2 trains today.
Just another plane.
Don't buy a lot of tickets.
The chair is Will Summers. There's no vice chair currently.
Hey, where's Will? He's usually early.
Colleen Keller was.
There's no more, there's
Court.
not a vice chair. There's Will Summers chair.
Who's over there? Oh, how are they gonna get through all these comments? before we have our meeting?
Did his term expire?
Well,
Yeah.
So procedurally, Gina, we have a quorum, so if you want to call us to order, I can take roll call. And since there's no chair present or vice chair.
I want to double check really quickly though, because there are some funky quorum rules when it comes to budget committee.
But of course, it's training too. You're not making
Right.
decisions.
There's no decision making, but there's,
Unfortunately.
but
that-
even to me, there's,
Yeah, that doesn't matter for a meeting.
okay.
Oh, you want some?
Do you want a sparkling water? I have an extra one in my bag.
That's right, I do. I actually have a lemon water.
I
thing
well, I
that
was
I'm
gonna keep
doing
them open
for
and
clients.
just
Like,
in case somebody comes in. or-
It's cold, if anyone would like it.
Okay,
Fresh to my fridge.
I am tempted now. because I have
So-
nothing because I
Here.
have to-
quorum
Ready
necessary
and
to hold
wanted.
meeting for local budget. A
Thank
budget
you.
committee
You're
must have a
welcome.
quorum or majority of the
Relatively saving my
total
life, even though I'm
membership of the
not
committee
really-
present.
You're
So we are
welcome.
okay.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. So what was the vote?
A total of the.
Sheesh.
Total.
To me.
So-
Wait, what do we need?
Yeah, okay.
We need 8.
Yep, so we're good.
Okay,
Yay.
is anybody else, are we expecting anybody else?
I reached out to Chris Hansen.
Everyone, but how dare they?
Yeah.
The
Digitally
chair's
or
online.
Okay,
She stepped behind
Yeah,
me.
maybe
I just
somebody-
texted Sheriff Summers and so if you want to just have a order, I will take roll and then if you just go.
okay. Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, after 6, so we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Mhm.
If you do roll call,
Budget commissioners, Novak.
Here.
Newton,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Montague,
Here.
Kropsinski,
Here.
Alex Johnson the second.
Here.
Amicia McGee, here right now. Brenneman. Bach. Here. Losi. Summers. Taylor.
Here.
All right.
Vernick and Hanson. 8 members present.
thank you.
All right, Gina, thanks.
Yeah.
So I had some comments prepared and they started out with good evening, Chair Summers. He's not here. But I wanted to welcome you all to an evening of budget training. And for some of you, this is your first budget training. The first budget committee for Ed. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I hope you've all had a chance to take the budget training that's provided by the Department of Revenue. Or the one that's provided by the League of Oregon Cities. I think maybe Matilda, you might have had that 2 years ago.
I did take some.
Tonight is not a repeat of that training. Okay. Tonight's an attempt to provide you with the playbook for how Albany's budget is built. The Department of Revenue or the League of Oregon Cities, when they provide the training, they provide an overview that's applicable to all public jurisdictions. Budget law applies to a water or a cemetery district, just as it applies to a city or a county. This training, however, is tailored for the city of Albany, and you'll leave this evening, hopefully, in about an hour, and hopefully with a better understanding of what informs and guides budget development here, what constrains the budget here, how departments develop their individual component pieces of the budget, how the finance director synthesizes those component pieces, and the timeline on which we operate. This is all of the stuff that happens before the point where the city manager presents the budget to the budget committee for review and approval. By that time, as you can imagine, there is a lot of work that has gone into budget development. Gina's presentation is entitled Budgeting Basics, but there's nothing simple or basic about this process. It's complex. It takes a lot of work on the part of a lot of people. And you will undoubtedly have opportunity to ask questions over the course of her presentation And rather than wait for the end of the presentation, I would encourage you to ask those questions as they occur to you. I was going to say through our budget committee chair, but in the absence of Will, if you just raise your hand, and I'm sure Gina will be looking for you. So the reason I say bring it up at the time is it's often the case that a clear understanding in one area is important for the same clear understanding in following areas. So at this point, before I turn the mic over to Gina, this is an appropriate time and a place to introduce to you our new finance manager, Casey Headley. And Casey's in the corner here. We're very happy to have Casey here joining us in the heat of the budget development process. And I hope you'll join me in personally welcoming her. And now let me turn it over to Gina for her presentation.
Thank you.
President, may I interrupt? Chris Hansen would like to know how to get online. He said he never saw an invitation.
If you go to the city's website, it scrolls all the way down to the bottom of the calendar. It lists this meeting and it says join meeting online. Click on that and it will launch the
City website, bottom of calendar, click on link to join the meeting. Okay, thank you. Sorry, just want to get him in.
And I'll text him with it.
Okay, good. Thanks. Maybe if you can send straight away a link. Come on. Thank you.
Okay. And
It's there. So obviously 4 people, right? Not including Dr. So Chris, Jesse, I've texted Jesse and Will. They're taking care of him.
And Chris, this is.
Who's the insurance?
Terry Byrne.
Terry Byrne. So if we have a new, did you say finance director?
Finance manager.
Finance manager. So we're not losing Gina, we're just gaining. No. Thank you. I feel better now.
Yeah. So
Where'd you come from?
I have been at the city of Lebanon the last few years. Prior to that, I was working for a CPA firm as an auditor in Pendleton, Oregon. So I worked there for almost 17 years.
Wow. And you came to Lebanon and over there.
Yeah, my
Wow.
husband's family is lives over here. So our kids graduated, we moved over.
It's good, great to have you.
Thank you. It's been, everybody's been really welcoming and
I'm sure
There's a lot.
super happy
you know,
oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
am so happy.
It's not as fun as poaching from Corvallis. It's almost.
I am having trouble getting this open. Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Can you help me, please?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's not letting me get into my,
Just not having it within reach.
so
Shuts me down.
I'm trying to open this here on my
Yes,
desktop,
that's true.
right?
But what I would like to do is just run across the
And it's
street, get
giving
my lemon
me-
water and come back, so. But it's only an hour.
It's giving me this.
I saw you.
Thought it was 2 hours. That's what it said.
But it's not.
Here's the hour.
I'm
It's
hoping.
not opening. Okay, so
Maybe getting a little bit of a late start, but.
I just have to do this. And maybe it'll pop up.
okay, I'm hiding.
I had to learn about roads today.
Well, I don't want it to start after. Oh my goodness. Just one, but go ahead and put it on if you want. It was just a slight difference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I have it on my desktop.
Okay, thank you.
Basketball.
Go sports ball, the orange variety.
To move,
Want to.
Basketball.
okay,
Where's the
Around already.
technology.
It's the orange variety.
It's forcing me into doing a restart. So Matt is going to run it for me.
It's the end, that WNBA has its right call. That's basketball played on Friday, that's what it's like.
Alex.
I watch women's
The
basketball. and I watch
volunteers.
men's basketball.
Yeah, he's like, "Go balls."
That's so amazing.
Oh, that's where it's been.
Yeah.
Where's Renee?
She's on the way.
She's on her way.
She got put by trainers.
Oh. Seeing what I'm
Is
saying.
this a-
No.
It was kind of weird.
Oh,
You're seeing that it's.
It's a cute little
Yeah,
baby.
so she needs to
with an
do,
umbrella.
is this a PowerPoint?
Share the other screen.
It is, so Matt's sharing because
There we go.
I'm having technology issues. There we go. Okay,
Oh, good.
so good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. Technology issues aside, I hope this will be informative. As Peter said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask as we go along. Basically, we're going to go through what our process is here at the city. There's going to be some basics that you'll see that are covered in the state of Oregon's presentations also, but we've got more specific information here. Okay, so basically what's a budget? As many of you know from your own personal or your businesses, a budget is a financial plan. It's kind of have a crystal ball, you know, in some ways, and you're looking at, okay, what revenues do we think are going to come in? What expenditures for either a single fiscal year or a biennial budget here in the state of Oregon? We use a biennial budget here at the city of Albany. Yeah, next, thanks. Okay, next. Okay, so who's involved in the budget process? Well, the Oregon Department of Revenue tells us what we need to do. There's local budget law. If you go out to the Department of Revenue's website, they have in-person trainings. They also have videos that you can watch. And there's a series of 4 of them. One of them is preparing the budget. There's approving the budget, which is done at the budget committee level. There is adopting the budget, which is done at council. And then there's after the budget and what we can do if we either get more revenues in or if something happens and we need to appropriate more funds or we need to transfer between funds. We can do that to a certain extent. Secretary of State Audits Division, every year we have to turn in our financial statements to the state and they will look at those. County assessor, they are the ones who tell us what our property tax numbers are going to be. Assessor, collector, treasurer, clerk. Any debt that we have, bonds that we issue, we are required to submit information about those to the municipal debt advisory. And then also the Department of Administrative Services and the revenue sharing that we get from them. We get marijuana money, we get cigarette tax, we get gasoline tax monies. We get something that's kind of called general state revenue sharing. All of those are numbers that come from the state and they're dependent mostly on per capita as well as revenues that are coming in. Next, please. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if people wanted to proceed. You guys were saying, so. now we
Okay.
are. Sure. Still see, okay, good.
And Chris Hansen is in, but
Okay, yes.
Okay, next, please. Okay. So there are certain things that are required for our budget process as dictated by local budget law. And that is we have to have a budget period. Ours is a biennial budget. We budget every 2 years. You have to list your basis of accounting and ours is a modified accrual. Another option would be cash, but we don't use that here. We get lots of monies in so we can accrue things back. And a budget officer, a budget message. You'll hear the budget message from Peter when we get to the budget committee meetings. And then a budget calendar, it's not required, but highly suggested. And I think Peter shared an abbreviated budget calendar with all of you. We have one internally that lines out even more what happens within not only finance, but within the departments. Next, please. Okay, and I talked about this already, what the budget process is. We prepare, we propose, it gets approved, adopted, and then after adoption, we can make changes. And it's a fairly formal process to do that.
And all of that is accompanied by public hearings.
Most of it. Yeah, most of it is accompanied. So the approving the budget is a public hearing. The adopting the budget, our initial, where we can take public comment, all of those. And then we tend to do supplemental budgets. We don't always need a public hearing for those, but they always have to be noticed and advertised so that reaching out to our public. So if somebody has interest in it, they can come in and participate.
And the budget committee meetings are all public.
Of course, yes. So what guides the budget? I kind of was joking about the crystal ball earlier. There are certain things that we look at that helps us develop the budget. So we look at the strategic plan, and we just recently updated that. So that is going to inform this process. The capital improvement program, Jeff Babbitt in Public Works usually puts that together for everybody in the city. I think we're going to be reviewing that early next month. But it'll be going to approval at the same council meeting for adoption that we ask for the budget to be adopted.
We just got copies of it by email today.
Yeah, sure did.
City policies. So those are the priorities that council chooses. And a lot of our policies we get approved by council. State rules and laws. We have to look at all of those. You know, some of the things that people don't necessarily always get is that we do fund accounting. And so monies can't be used interchangeably for all programs in the city. And then council priorities, I talked about that a little bit. And then we also look at the Government Finance Officers Association best practices. That is the organization that we belong to. Every budget that we do, we submit to them for review, and we have won awards every year on it. So and for our financials also. Okay, so other considerations is we look at prior budgets and what the actuals are, and you know, what are the future costs? How are we going to keep things going? Those are how departments set their priorities. We evaluate the future needs of the city, including technology and equipment costs. We really lined that out in the last budget process to departments. We want them to we want everybody to be able to track and not all of a sudden have to pay for $1 million piece of equipment where they've actually saved it up as we've gone along. Considering ways to make processes more efficient. We're always looking at that. Can we automate something? Is there something that we can contract out? You know, what is the best way of doing that? A lot of times though, our hands are tied with certain things. For example, one of the social responsibilities that the city has is working with a QRF for custodial services. A QRF it's now called, they just changed the name, but it's a qualified rehabilitative facility. It's for people who have some sort of developmental disabilities who can work under supervision and perform the tasks that we need. And the state does require us to use a QRF first for certain services. They're not always the least expensive way of doing things, but it's a way that we can help, you know, help in that way. And then we also work with departments to identify their needs, balance their budgets. Most of the department heads are really good at what they do, and they're great to work with. But maybe they want to do something a little bit different. One of the things that we're looking at with fire for this next upcoming budget process is we're going to combine two of their current programs together, make it a little more efficient. And then we look at inflation and its effect on costs. This inflation in the last couple of years has really hit us hard, and it's making big changes to how we're budgeting. So the budget calendar, as I said, you know, we have an internal one, and then Peter sent you the one that's a little more public facing. We start with our central services budgeting, and we'll go through each of these. I had printed this off so I could refer back to it, but that's okay. I'll get to it. So you go ahead. Yeah. And you can go to the next one. Okay, what are central services? A lot of people don't know what central services is. Central services is the central office. It's where all the departments, city, county, and state, what we are. Some people refer to us as overhead. But we provide a wide range of internal support services for the ongoing operations of the city. We have administration, central services administration covers costs that are not specific to any one central service department, such as an enterprise resource planning system or audit services. Whether or not finance existed internally, we have to have audit services done. So it laserfish for retention, document retention. So those costs are coming out of this administration. We have finance, we have the city manager's office, IT, human resources, and building maintenance. Building maintenance was a new addition in the last budget cycle. They handle all of it. They're funded entirely by the different departments of the city. And that's really what essential service is. It's a service that we provide, but we're funded by all the other departments.
Like people want to get paid.
Yes, like people who want to get paid and people who want their vendors paid.
Yes.
Yes.
So building maintenance also encompasses the QRF process that we use for.
No, not in this case. We contract with the QRF. So building maintenance doesn't, they're the liaison with the QRF. So if, for example, somebody goes into the restroom and it's not taken care of, it's not clean, then building maintenance would be the ones to contact them and say, you know, we need you to take care of this. Next, please. Oh.
Building maintenance is beyond janitorial services.
It really is. Yeah, yeah. Building maintenance, they come in and they fix things. So I will admit that my office was a little chilly, so maybe I plugged in a space heater and maybe I blew the circuit in my office and they had to pull in an electrician to fix it. But I also had a faulty outlet. But yeah, building maintenance they're the people who come and take care of that for us. So I now have to plug it into a different outlet. So the costs are allocated to departments based on a variety of methods. And we have to be able to justify what that methodology is. We have to be able to explain why it's a good basis of allocation. And so, for example, in human resources, it's the number of employees. That's how we allocate those costs. City manager's office, we do the average of the two prior biennia to do that. The city manager's office pretty much they don't do really anything specific for departments. They're kind of an overhead and provide guidance to everybody. Accounts payable works on the number of invoices, code enforcement. Departments that use Christian Dell services are the ones who pay for those services. We also have cash receipting. If we do AR, we have our person who does AR. A portion of that goes out depending on the number of billings that she does. Next, please. Okay. So these are some of the assumptions and costing that we do. So we're assuming that property tax is going to increase 3.5% year over year. Materials and supplies this year, you know, in the past, we used to do like a 3% increase, and this year it just really depends on the department. If you have somebody in public works and they're looking at steel or they're looking at some other metal that the supply chain issues have just really driven the cost up, then we look at those specifically and they would say, you know what, we think the cost of this material is going to go up 15%, 20%, however much it is. We forecast personnel using a lot of different criteria. We have salary schedules. Holly Roten had come to council with recent increases and, you know, making sure that we are currently in line with market, and also that we don't have a lot of compression between bargaining units and non-bargaining units.
I think one of the saving factors we have because of your office is that we always budget conservatively,
We do.
just to, you know, because of all those intangible things that can come up and bite you if you don't.
Absolutely. And so sometimes people think we budget a little too conservatively, but you know, I think it's the smartest way of going. Yes.
So your salary schedules, and whatnot. You know, with the, I'm going to say with the inflation that's going on, you know, we had 9% over the summer. Well, each month where we've seen even more, that's not going back to the original starting point. That's from that 9%. Oh, it went up another 6. Oh, it went up another 6, went up another 7. How are you keeping track? I mean, it's hard enough to find people to wait in restaurants and pay them a wage that they're willing to accept. What's your magic bullet?
Well, Director Roten did a fabulous job of negotiating with the different unions. And so we have collective bargaining agreements in place with each of them that will last, I think most for 4 years. So, and there are some, you know, the increases are a little more than we had hoped for, but honestly, you know, I think it was a win-win for employees and for management.
Considering some of our neighboring communities.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that not everybody may not know is that when we go out to negotiate, we have to look at the market, and we have comparators that are 50% population wise greater and 50% lower. And we have to look at all of those, and we have to be within a certain market value of those. And so it can make it tough when you have neighboring communities that had really high COLAs. They're a little wealthier community than we are, but you know, it impacts us. So we have other things like longevity pay, and then health insurance. We usually use a 15% increase. We're really hoping that it's going to come in lower than that this year. Things are promising, but again, we want to be conservative when we budget, just in case something pops up. We have certification pays. There are certain departments that have certification pays because their employees have to be certified by the state to do certain levels of what they do. Taxes, federal and state. We have a new paid family medical leave that's coming down. There's an employer paid portion of that we're going to have to budget for. And we're on top of it. We're looking at that now. We have it included in our budgeted numbers. And then workers' compensation, that's really based on department. We have a certain rate that each department or each job classification is responsible for. And then if we have other workers' comp payments that go out, it goes back to the department who has that. Next, please.
Before you move on.
Yeah.
You kind of slid right by the PERS 34%. Can you address that, please?
Sure. So the PERS, our PERS rate that we have that we're currently charging departments is made up of the PERS rate that we're given by the state. We use a blended number here so that every employee gets charged the same rate. If you have tier 1 and tier 2 employees, they cost more. If you have public safety employees, they cost a little bit more. And then you have general service, OPSERP, and everybody has different rates. We blend them just to make things a little bit easier on us. This number also includes 6% pickup for employees that was negotiated into the CBAs, the collective bargaining agreements, a long time ago. Pardon?
You said pickup?
Yeah, so there's two pieces to PERS. There's an employee paid portion, and then there's an employer paid portion. So the city also pays the employees 6%. That goes into an IAP, which is an individual.
Yes, to work out.
Blank.
The employee investment.
Yeah, there's something like that. Anyway, it's almost like a 401k. We
Yes.
contribute 6% to. So this also includes our debt. We had PERS debt that we had issued a long time ago. And so that includes picking up that also. What we've done in the last few budget cycles is if we end up collecting more than we have paid out to PERS, we've been putting that money into a PERS reserve so that if we get a sudden increase in rates, that we can help smooth that by pulling money out of the reserve. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of choice on what we get charged for PERS. It really is what the state tells us, and then adding in our debt service and that 6%.
So this part confuses me every time because it's a different world. I'm not in that world. I'm in a completely different world. So what does the 34% mean? I don't understand what 34% of what.
So 34% of salaries,
Okay,
we collect for PERS. I mean, so let's say you make even numbers, $100,000.
sure, let's say that.
Let's say that.
I like that.
So on top of that $100,000,
Yeah.
you have $34,000
Mhm.
that will be paid out to PERS.
That's coming out of my check.
Nope, no, that the city has to pay in addition to what your salary is.
So
Okay.
basically, we, as the city, we would be, it would cost us 134,000 to pay.
Because of the benefits.
Because of the
People that are
PERS.
already receiving the
You know,
benefits. The whole entitlement thing.
What's interesting with me, I work in the insurance industry, and when I look at a PERS retiree, I had two folks, and their PERS insurance costs $700 more than what civilian would pay. And I literally put $1,400 back in this couple. They left PERS. They're in their 90s. They don't use any other benefits other than health insurance. It's the same exact thing that I was offering. They put $1,400 back in their paycheck.
So again, a city employee that's making $100,000, there's an additional 34% on top of that the city is paying to put into their retirement.
No, not into their retirement. So, I mean, yes, to their retirement. So one portion of the 6% goes in, so 6% will come into a fund that is directly for me. Except the state now has taken a piece of that and said, oh no, we need to pay this towards the other part to help pull down the liability for that. So there's a portion of it that, so I think I get, I don't remember what it is. It's like 5 point, is it 7.5? Okay. Yeah. So I get like 5.25 put into the account that's associated directly to me. 0.75% of that goes into the other portion, which is what the employer pays into. And it's sort of like Social Security, where they put money into this pool. They look at, so tier 1 and tier 2 employees have a guaranteed amount that they will get, a percentage that they'll get on when they retire on that. So, but that goes into the pool. So it's not like when I retire, every bit of the money that was contributed for me is going to come to me.
Right, the next people, the people that are still working are going to contribute to your retirement, right? Am I
Yes.
Understanding that, right?
Yes.
So, Council Novak, I can see where it's confusing because you go up 2 lines and it says that health insurance is 15% increase.
Yeah.
That 15% and those 34%, they're apples and oranges. It's a 15% increase in the cost of
Right.
health insurance. Whereas PERS, that $34,000 if the salary is $100,000. You also have to add in Social Security and workers' comp, paid family medical leave.
Right.
And by the end, all is said and done, for the person that's making $100,000, you're probably paying about $180,000 all total.
Those would pay 95% of your health insurance.
And in order to afford that, that's why we keep having to create new taxes and fees for people to pay.
No, so how I understand it, this is because my husband works for a city and my
Okay.
father-in-law works for a city.
Okay,
So my father-in-law's outlier because he's tier 1. Like he is golden goose. He's great. He's retiring in March this month, I guess. But so my husband doesn't get like a raise like I do in the private work world. Whereas like sometimes I'll get like Last year I got a 15% raise. My husband will get a 2% raise basically every single year. My father-in-law has never gotten raises his entire career. He's only gotten cost of living adjustments.
That's kind of a raise. Cost of
Kind
living.
of, but not really. It's really not. And that the whole reason is because he's been working for a city, really it's underpaid by the market rate for what
That's
you would
what I
typically
hear
be
every
doing.
time we talk about these things.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so,
Yeah, they're not getting what the market would,
Yeah.
I get that, but for those of us in my world, there's none of that. No one's giving me a COLA, no one's giving me anything. If I can't make it, set it aside, whatever, I got squat.
that
So that's why I
is-
just want to understand this, because
I
there's
get, I
a
get
world
that,
of
like,
people in my universe too, who don't have anyone giving them anything on a regular
I
basis.
understand that, especially if that's like the risk you take with like owning a small business.
Mhm.
You know, I have a small business inside as well. Like I, if I want to make more money, I have to charge more money with a
Uh-huh.
lot of things, or
And there are
there's only
things
a
the
certain
market will
number.
only bear X,
Yeah.
if my costs go through the roof because of inflation and the market won't let me, whatever. Anyway, I don't want to make this
Yeah,
about me. I'm
that's-
just saying this is really difficult because I represent the people like me and we're the ones who are having to
Yeah, no, I understand
pay
that.
additional whatever because this is such a huge driver of cost.
So I'll tell you what
Yeah.
and this is maybe just my opinion,
Hmm.
the employees that are ruining PERS are the football coaches at the universities.
48,500.
Yeah, well, see, that's the sort of thing, yeah, all these things,
So,
it's like I look at that and
the
I'm like,
first
I don't- what
The PERS program is perfect, but it does do a lot of good for our employees that do a
Yeah.
lot of really great
Can we
public
get back
service.
on task?
Yeah, let's go on.
I have,
Sorry.
I have a
It
raise.
wasn't soft pass.
Yes.
I need to understand.
How many tier one employees are still working? Can't be
That's a
that
good
many.
question.
Well, I just have another question.
Oh, okay.
You were contemplating.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would have to look. There's still quite a few.
Yeah,
And our rates, and just to understand a little bit about the PERS rates. So in 2016, they, GASB came and said, the governmental finance world, they said, your retirement costs are X, you're bringing in Y. You have to figure out how to fund this gap, and that's what drives the rates. So your tier one and tier two employees, they don't have that Cadillac plan anymore, but we still have employees that reside under that. So I think it was at 2003 and older new hires. You can't kick them out of that plan. When that plan was designed, there was definitely a huge lack of financial planning. I think we need to forge forward because it is a Cadillac retirement plan. The employees that are now being hired are not in that same plan, but the rates drive it because it has to fund those employees who did retire in that tier one and tier two plan.
Yeah,
and
so the
those
tier
that
one,
are-
tier two folks have to actuarially disappear before everything starts to.
So,
review again.
right,
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Counselor.
these rates are driven by the misfunding of the tier one, tier two plan. Is a lot to do with, that has a lot to do with it. So yes, it looks like a lot of money. There's a reason behind it. It's because the debt's this big and the money coming was this big and we had that gap. And they've slowly increased the rates over the last 6 years. Well, I say slowly, but it really jumped quite a bit in the last 6 years. Because if you looked at the rates 10 years ago, they were not this high. And that came into play when when people were looking at those numbers and saying, we're missing the point here. We're not going to, we're gonna sink.
Sure, yeah.
So, yes.
And every time we have a major market downturn, like we're experiencing now, the costs for the retirement, they're not bearing the loss. Meaning
Right.
that those retirement costs are there. If the market goes down and makes PERS savings that they have invested go down, they're gonna ask the employers to make up that difference.
So the old style of retirement, I used to write pension plans, and back in the 80s and 70s, retirements were built on what they call the defined benefit. which meant when you retired, you've got $2,000 a month. It doesn't matter how much money the market does anything, you always get this flat amount. Retirement plans like 401k plans, they're not driven like that anymore. They do flux with the market. This PERS plan is a defined benefit, not the 6%. The 6% goes into a market flux account. But the defined benefit portion is you will work for the governmental agencies for this many years. You make the average salary of this, your pension is this, and that regardless of what the market does. So the market will fluctuate and dictate what these rates can drive.
And what's hard about it is that even if they try to reform the system, they can only do it prospectively. They can't do it retroactively. And so that's why there are some rates that are just in place and we have to live with them because we can't change them at this point.
I have a question for you. What is our PERS debt right now?
What our liability is?
Yes.
Uh,
Because when I first came on council 4 years ago, it was 36 something.
That's two different questions. What's our debt? What's our liability?
oh,
Yes.
what the PERS, what our actual PERS debt is?
Yes.
I don't have that off the top of my head. I mean, I can get back to you on that. We're paying it off, every year we make
Yeah.
payments towards that.
I think describing what that debt is an important issue because it's different than what our liability is right
It is. So the PERS debt were bonds that the city, along with some other communities, went out for in order, okay, this is gonna get complicated. So in PERS, organizations can have a side account. And so what they do is they contribute money to that, which helps reduce the amount of rate, the increase in rates that they pay for a certain period of time. And that's what that debt was. We went into it a long time ago, like I said, it reduced the rates by a certain amount. But now, honestly, it hasn't really helped us. We're just paying it off now. So that's what that debt is. That's separate than what our PERS liability is. The PERS liability is every year we have to, or every couple of years, we have to send in information to the actuaries that include what our number of employees, ages of employees, dependents of those employees, retirees, all that information goes into that and what their salaries are. And then the actuaries take a look at that and say, okay, this is what we think you need to be paying. So it's similar to insurance,
Yeah.
And so it's every couple of years we get new rates.
Questions are great and they reflect a great interest, but don't blame me if you don't get out of it now.
I will say that in this upcoming biennium, we're not planning to increase the PERS rates that we're charging departments. We are keeping them steady.
So in green, right?
So some of the other things that they've done to try to improve it is they've basically done like a refinance. If you refinance your mortgage and they push out the payments, but they're a smaller amount, they've done the same kind of thing there. Unfortunately, that just means that you're paying more in the long run.
You'll never pay off your house.
It's convoluted. Well, my brother, who is, just turned 50 and had 30 years in, he's gonna be on there for a while, I hope, so.
Ain't no easy fix unless they're disappeared. I think.
So in green.
Okay, so one of the things, the other thing that we have at the city, and I don't know how many people are familiar with this, is that we have fund accounting. So with only a few exceptions, like the general fund, which can be used for anything, one fund's revenues really can't be used to pay for another fund's expenditures. We have different types of funds here. We have the general fund, like I said, can be used for everything. Ours currently funds police, fire, municipal court, library, planning. I think that's it. We have the internal service funds, which include the central services. It also includes the public works internal service. That is a group of programs that charge their expenses back to the programs that use those services. we're, in both cases, we're funded by the departments that we serve. There's urban renewal, the Albany Revitalization Agency, CARA is in there. We have 2 debt service funds. One of those, we found out not too long ago that if you have a general obligation debt, it has to be recorded separately from other debt service. So that's why we have 2. We used to only have 1 and then we had to change it.
And that geo debt is the police and fire building.
It is. We have capital projects, and then we have some special revenue accounts. Those are the ones that are mainly funded by revenues that, like, for example, streets. We get funding from gasoline tax for that. We have transit, we get FTA grants, we get some state shared revenue that we direct towards that. So with these different funds and these different, we can't use sewer money to pay for police. You know, we can't use urban renewal money to pay for, well, we can use it to pay for streets if it's in a very specific location. But we can't use it for debt reduction, for example. We can't use it to pay our debt down.
This is where the term fungible comes into play,
Yes.
or not.
Very siloed in the way funding is allocated.
Exactly. Yeah, a silo is a perfect word for it. Okay. So governmental funds, those are funds that we use to account for the general purpose and function of the government. They're not restricted to specific purpose. The general funds isn't restricted to a specific purpose. We can use it for whatever we want to use it for. And like I said, we choose to use it to fund those programs. It's the only fund that governments are required to have. They have to have one fund, a general fund.
That's why
Yes.
we're here.
That's why we're here. And so in the general fund, there's an administration program. We have police, fire, library, municipal court planning. Administration is for costs that aren't necessarily associated with one of these other programs. For example, we collect TLT revenues on behalf of Lynn County. So it comes into the revenue account in the general fund. We pay it out of the administration program because it's not really planning, police, court, et cetera. That's what the administration is for. Planning, as many of you know, they do a lot of work. Got a planning commission public hearing going on right now, helping lay out how the city is and making sure we're doing what's legally required of us. And then the other services, if you have any questions, just let me know, but they're pretty, I think, self-explanatory. Okay, so revenue sources. Property taxes are main, not our main, actually. It's one of our sources. Property taxes, franchise fees, and privilege taxes. Those are funds that we receive from companies that are doing business in the city and using our streets or right of ways to do that. Comcast pays its franchise agreements. Northwest Natural Gas, we receive franchise agreement. We have franchise agreements with them. We receive franchise fees from them. Republic Services, yes.
All those companies with fiber optic cable.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Like the ones that we, recently had a couple new ones that we entered into agreements with. We have governmental, those cigarette taxes, gasoline taxes, although gasoline taxes goes to street, so never mind. Marijuana taxes come into this one. We have alcohol taxes that come in and then transfers in. For example, we have one grant that we have somebody in planning who gets part of her pay from a grant, and so we get transfers in. So that is what that is.
It was like administrative fees or something.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, the grant person, yeah.
yeah, they can cover some of her salary and benefits. Charges for service, fines,
Yeah.
license, yes. Oh,
Another question.
sorry. Yeah,
Not all licenses and fees go to general fund, is that correct? I'm thinking of the planning and building for your building permits.
building inspection those revenues can only go to the building program because they are required to be used for building purposes. So these fines or these licenses and fees tend to be things like alarm fees, dog licenses, those types of licenses and fees.
Does this include when I see on a bill, on my own bills where it says privilege tax? So that percentage is going to the general fund?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes. And I will note that not all companies charge the full amount of the franchise fee that they pay to us. I know some of them will cover a piece of it. They are legally able to pass on that full expense, but not all of them do. Okay, investment earnings, that's the interest that we receive from our investments. And then other resources, if we happen to get some miscellaneous revenue in from something that could go there too.
The city services fee goes into the general.
Oh, you know what? Yes,
You're welcome.
Say that
thank
again,
you.
please.
The city services fee,
Services fee.
a portion of that goes into the general fund, a portion of it goes to parks. So the city services fee was enacted in August of 2021. And it helps fund our general fund departments. I will need to get this updated to reflect that. I think I can have it on there. So as you can see in our general fund revenues, property tax, is slightly increasing. But overall, it's not like we're getting in a ton more money each year,
Despite all the new building that's going on.
despite all the new building that's going on.
Once they start coming online, it'll start it.
That's what we're hoping.
Look at how much we're adding to the city services fee for everything. Building goes online as well.
But if you have buildings that change to county or state or city,
Comes off.
that comes off.
Comes right off. And nonprofits, we have their schools, churches, all of those are tax exempt.
But they
They-
pay the
they
city
do put-
services.
they do
fee.
But
pay
they
city
pay
services
the city services fee. Yes, they do. So. Okay, property tax is a percentage of general fund revenues. As you can see, really property tax is becoming smaller and smaller each year. We have other revenues that are growing at a higher rate.
Because property taxes are capped by state law.
3.5%, 3% increase in assessed value. Yeah. I will say the League of Oregon Cities is lobbying to do some reform in that area. We'll see what happens with it. So
Been doing that
for a long time, yes.
But Hope Springs.
Yes, fingers crossed. Okay, city services fee. We've expected about 5.4 million over the course of the biennium. To date, we've received about 4.3 million of that. Low-income assistance program. I went and talked to Patty McGinnis, who is our Public Works Customer Service Supervisor, and it's kind of interesting. She said in December, we had 268 families who were taking advantage of the program, and it's about $1,071 a month. So roughly about $20,000 has been spent for the low-income assistance program. She said this year, so far they have about 65 people who have applied. So they've reached out to City Community Services Consortium and just said, why the disconnect? Why did we suddenly have this decrease in this? And so said, when people are coming in for this kind of assistance, can you let them know that they're eligible for this assistance too?
Can I get information on that assistance? I had someone call me and they just adopted their grandchild and they're now only eating one meal a day because they are trying to make sure their grandchild eats enough. And
You
then-
talking about Mr. Brand?
Yes, he called you as well.
I had a long conversation and I just talked to, she's taking care of it.
Okay, excellent. I'm gonna call him again.
Public waste piece.
Yep,
She's
but
taking
then
fast
also it
direct
turned into
mailing.
like, not access to like food boxes and these like food, there's a lot.
Yeah, so we had a long conversation.
Okay.
We do have it on the city's website too. It's available.
Extension of public services.
Yeah, he was calling about the public services.
Oh, Republic.
Yeah,
But then-
Director Bailey's been in touch about that.
Yeah, and then it cascaded into a few other things.
Nutria.
Oh my gosh, not yet.
Okay, so
I had that conversation.
So.
Oh, with Mr. Brand?
special revenue funds for resources that are restricted to specific purposes, and that's like the building inspection fund. We can only collect, what we collect in the building services department can only be used for building service programs. What we collect in debt service, although debt service is, they tend to kind of all, you think of them as just general funds. Special revenue funds, parks and recreation, we charge fees for classes and programs that come back to fund those programs and help pay for the people who do those programs for our constituents.
Because there's a high demand for the buildings during the summer for family get-togethers, whatnot, supply and demand. They do charge a fee for use, which makes sense to me.
We did just approve the reduction of fees for nonprofits. So.
For nonprofits, which I appreciate. I have Girl Scout troop, and one year we used the senior center for the Court of Awards, and it was awesome. And we got to pay the reduced rate, which was great. We had more people there than we'd had at a lot of the other ones that we had done throughout the years. So we were very appreciative of having that facility available. And now it's even prettier. So if I were continuing with Girl Scouts, we may try to look at that again. So it's included in parks, the special revenue funds. So it's pretty much those programs in the city that aren't really specific to either they're not general fund, they're not the enterprise fund, which are water, sewer, stormwater. They're kind of ones in the middle. They get funding from the specific activities that they do, and it's used to fund that. Public safety levy is in here. That money gets transferred each year from this fund into the general fund to support police and fire. Police and fire each have their own public safety levy programs, and the money goes into those programs. Risk management, that's where we have like our PERS reserve. We have a general risk management reserve in there, so that if something were to happen, we may have some funding that we could be able to go into. There's another type of fund we could do, capital replacement. That is where departments are saving up money to pay for their either IT equipment or their regular equipment.
Fire trucks, police cars.
Fire trucks, police cars. And that capital replacement fund is pretty much general fund for the most part now. One of the things that we did is we allowed departments to have their own capital replacement fund program. And so it makes for a little bit easier tracking for them.
So each department goes out for their own grants, or is that not centrally located yet?
Grants are not centrally located yet. We will be bringing that forward in the next budget cycle for a grant administrator. We're hoping that that position would actually fund itself, or at least be able to bring in some additional revenues.
No, she's the finance.
Okay. So again, the revenue source is intergovernmental. We get funding from a variety of revenue sources. So this could be like the gas tax to fund streets. We get state shared revenue that goes towards transit. We get FTA funds that go towards transit. Airport gets some federal funding. There's a lot of different funding sources that you can have in revenue in the special revenue funds. So Parks does get a portion of property taxes. They also get a portion of the city services fee. But then you have the building fees and permits, we talked about that, and then some other charges for service like for parks and the services that they provide.
Doesn't Parks give us a portion of the SDCs as well?
Parks does have a portion of SDCs. to help with development of new parks. So debt service, we account for debt-related payments. It's pretty simple, so. And either it's funded by departments, so like the debt service, we collect money from departments to pay for it, which happens to be that PERS debt, and then the general obligation comes in through property tax.
Well, and that, but some of the debt service is related to state loans that we received for public works projects, correct?
It is, and so the enterprise fund have their own debt service programs,
Okay.
because enterprise funds have to be treated differently than governmental funds.
And would you define enterprise for me? I mean, you used
Yeah.
it several times. I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, we're gonna be coming up on some slides for, 'em, but,
Okay,
okay, but
yeah.
enterprise funds are those funds that are rate driven. So we're looking at water, stormwater, sewer. So the way they pay for their their services is by charging out rates to the people who use those services. It's also sometimes referred to as business type activities. So there are a lot of different enterprise funds that we could have. Casey and I were just talking about, some cities own a golf course. We do not. If the airport were self-sustaining, it potentially could be an enterprise fund, but they're not. Right now, it's just the main three are water, sewer, and stormwater.
Thank you.
And no golf courses are never self.
Sort of like indoor pools.
Yes.
Sort of like what?
Indoor pools.
Indoor.
So I talked a little bit about the capital projects fund already. Basically, it's for equipment replacement and IT. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. No, this is capital projects. Capital projects, we use this fund for projects like the public safety buildings. When we built a new fire station and a new police station, it came out of this capital projects fund because frankly, police and fire don't have capital budgets for those kinds of projects in their programs. So these are going to be governmental construction and infrastructure. And again, enterprise funds have their own programs, construction projects funds in their programs. So sometimes you get transfers in. So for example, water will take some of the water programs will do transfers to their capital projects fund. And then we save up the money in those programs until they have enough to complete the project that they want to do. Sometimes we have sales of property, and that money can go into that too. We had that with the old police station came into here, and then sometimes charges for service. We had LIDs that used to be tracked in here too, local improvement districts. I don't think we currently have any of those though. We're just getting paid off from some of them. Permanent funds, those account for endowments. We have permanent funds in library. We have two programs where we had somebody who said, I'm going to give you $10,000. And of that $10,000, you can only use the interest to buy new materials. And somebody else said, we have $69,000 we're going to give you, and you can only use the interest that generates to buy new materials. So those are permanent. We're holding. They're funds that we can't spend. We can only, it's an endowment. We can only use the interest. And the proprietary funds, these account for business-like activities. They're also called enterprise funds. Well, enterprise funds are a part of those, used to account for activities in which a fee is charged. Water, sewer, stormwater.
Sorry, I asked my question a little early, didn't
You're fine. So in this, you'll see a drop down in the 2020 numbers. We had some loan proceeds that came in. You can see there was that big jump. We did a loan. I think this, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was for the Riverfront Interceptor program.
Yes.
We got we got a chunk of money that came in for that, so. The charges for service went down a little bit in that year, but. Otherwise, you know, that's really the way that they keep the lights on or keep the water going. And then internal service, we talked about that already, central services, public works, central services, providing services for other departments and getting funded by those departments. And these are just some of the public works central service fund programs. And then how those get allocated out.
What's O and M? Operations.
In maintenance, yeah. I know it's like,
Just didn't know what the M was.
yeah. Urban renewal. So I don't know how many people are familiar with TIF funding, tax increment financing. When a district is established, the property taxes are frozen at that point in time. Anything that comes in above that goes towards this district for this purpose. As most of you know, we're doing the waterfront project right now. And so that is where a majority of the rest of the spending is going.
And it's kind of like the last hurrah before this thing is supposed to shut down.
Before
Its
sunsets.
ability to lend out.
And it will still exist to pay off the debt. We can pay off the debt sooner than what we're supposed to. There's a lot of different aspects that we can look at, but yeah, this is kind of like the last hurrah. Yeah, sometimes, so the sale of property also will come into that. So that's a process that we go through to prepare the budget. We look at the central services, we start that back in October. And then we come up with our methods of allocation. The directors who are part of the central service programs departments will take a look at what our needs are. You know, what do we need to have a grants administrator? Do we need to have additional staffing because regulations and rules have just, you know, gotten out of control? And so we'll look at the budgets. We have meetings then with the city manager. And we talk about those budgets and he will green light us to move forward with those. Once we have our allocations, we will take those budgets and we'll allocate them out to the departments based on the allocation methodology for that particular department. Once we get to there, we do a forecasting for the general fund. So how much property tax do we think we're going to bring in? How much do we think we're going to get in franchise fees, privilege taxes, fines, fees, charges for service, all those types of things, ambulance revenues. And we'll look at all of those and, you know, is it higher than it was currently? Are we, you know, we're looking at that and determining, you know, looking at all the things that inform that and coming up with a revenue. And then at that point, what we do is we allocate that out to the general fund programs. In the meantime, while they're working on that, you have all the other departments who are also working on their budgets. And most budgets, like for sewer, stormwater, water, internal staff will go, what are our needs? What have we got? What kind of rates do we have? What are the requirements? And so they'll come up with their budgets. So once all of these budgets are completed and entered into our accounting software, we have meetings again with Peter and finance to discuss what those budgets are and to discuss whether they're reasonable. Do we need to be adding FTE? Do we need to hold back on that? And really just looking at how much is this going to cost us in the future if we do this now? You know, the last thing we want to do is hire people and then have to lay them off in 2 years. So we look at all of that. Yeah.
How does the SIP integrate into that process?
So departments will look at that and they will have to schedule their capital outlay, their different programs. So I know
Can you just
Parks will-
explain the acronyms?
Oh,
You said
'cause,
SEP.
yeah. Capital,
Improvement projects.
yeah.
That's Reno City Councilors.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
so, they will, you'll have, parks, for example, who are looking at what do we think we're gonna we're gonna put in a new park. What's that gonna cost us? How much money do we need to be saving for that? But it also provides a look at people, at how much doesn't get funded. Because it has, hopefully we're capturing all of the projects throughout the city that need to be done. And we show which ones are funded and which ones aren't. So, I mean, it can be very informative in showing you where we have some of these shortfalls.
The thing I found interesting about it is you're looking at 1, 3, 5, 10, and 15 years because of the different costs of it. Like if you're going to do a major road rebuild, that may be 5 to 10 years down the road where you're having to allocate monies to it. So you're not trying to pick it up all at one time. So if you haven't read it yet, you should.
Yeah, and matter of fact, to exactly what Will's talking about, as you read this every couple of years, you will see projects move up the food chain as far as their budgeting is getting closer and closer to all of a sudden now the project's going to be done. The funding's already there, so it's been reserved over time. It takes time to move up. We can't do them all at the same time. So,
And then there's always new projects that, come up from the bottom.
and then
So,
there's some emergency
Yeah, then I
projects
was
that
gonna
have to
say,
have,
yes,
Emergency, you have a major water line break. All of a sudden you're replacing early, so changes priorities. So, but it's a good starting point. If you haven't read it, you should.
And a lot of these things, obviously, from my perspective anyway, are driven by our strategic plan.
yes.
So.
We just updated that, so.
Does anybody have any questions about anything? I think, we put a lot of work into this. There's, we start back in the fall, and honestly, we're looking at things year round, departments are looking at their departments and, what new rules do we have to come up with? Holly Roten is looking at paid family medical leave. We've been working on that for a few months now, it doesn't take effect until September, but we're trying to plan for that to make sure that we are positioned correctly. So,
And that's staff allocation there, which is, or wasn't something you might have been planning on.
we were not
last
planning
year.
on that. We had to add it at the last minute to our costing. And so, we do all of this work. And so that when we come to the budget committee with our proposed budget, there's been a lot of thought behind it. And, we've taken into account all of this, the strategic plans and the CIP and council policies and priorities and all of those things. And, we certainly welcome questions, from it's a public meeting, anyone is welcome to attend. But, if you ever have questions about any of this throughout the year, it doesn't need to wait until budget committee. You're always welcome to ask questions at any time.
Gina mentioned that we take into account policy, strategic plan, a lot of documents, but I would throw in there something else, and that's emerging requirements.
Yeah.
And as an example, I would talk, the budget is fairly well tuned, and it's over time, it reflects the community's priorities in any community. But this year, and then maybe the last year, we see, and you all know it, an increasing cybersecurity threat. So we have to hire one more person onto our IT staff. But anytime we make an exception, not an exception, but a hire like that, or allocate resources, plus it up in one area, it's gonna have to probably go down in another area, unless our revenues go up to meet that. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's something that we do on a fairly, I won't say a frequent basis, but it is a regular basis.
So you said that you took council priorities into account. How do you determine what the council's priorities are?
Well, when council makes decisions and, we get resolutions that they come up with, then we will look at those. If council were to say, we need to fund this specific program, we will certainly look at that and we will determine how do we fund that. And
The room say, how are we gonna do that?
right, and then we would come back and we'd say, okay, well, here are the options. We can do this, but if we do this, we're not doing this. Or, and you know, it comes back to budget committee and council during the budget committee process. And so it's not like it's what we do is the final say.
There's a good example of that is Parks Fund, right? It's council's directed policies is to fund the parks program at a certain percentage.
Right, or even the fact that, you know, Maple Lawn has been extended for another year. That was a council
That's right.
directive. The council said, yeah, we're gonna do this, so we're funding it for another year.
I can jump in here, that when we talk about setting council priorities, the priorities that we're dealing with now, primarily for this biennium, were set by different council.
Correct.
That when we reviewed the strategic plan, the most recent time, half of the councilors were not there. And so the priorities may change, shift, be adjusted with new input from new people.
Okay.
So we have to have a baseline to move forward, but
Yeah.
when your shoes wear out, we need new shoes. So
Right.
it can change. We review the strategic plan every year, and we had just done a major review of the strategic plan before the November election. So,
It hadn't been really substantially changed since 2007.
no.
Interesting.
So yes, it was, now we're working on the comprehensive plan next, right? So you should have received a hard copy of the comprehensive plan, councilors.
Is that what hard copy?
Yeah.
Changes they're working on right now?
Don't feel left out.
No, we're gonna,
I'm trying to say.
Oh, for the hard copy versus.
No,
Oh,
just
yeah,
the
after
the
the
council
county commission.
priorities. The team has new members now, so.
And as council goes along and, you know, they make new decisions and we look at those and, you know, if the priority is on housing affordability, we will try to accommodate that. You know, we got some recent funding from state. And so, Ann Catlin, you know, really ran with that. And so came up with solicited some programs that we'll be able to use that funding for to help with that.
Yes, that complete us for your presentation?
Yep,
I would, like, we can entertain more questions, but I did want to say that, you know, I have 3 watchwords: service, stewardship, and integrity. And those watchwords imbue this process. What you heard about is process. There's a human element to this too, right? All the people who work this process and create this budget are human beings. So what I try to imbue in that process is an emphasis on service, an emphasis on stewardship, an emphasis on integrity. But we look forward to bringing the result of that to you when we have our first budget committee meeting in April. It's hard to believe, but it's just 1 month away.
Yeah.
So I'll back to Councilor Novak's point about April. April is a very busy month for council meetings. I have to apologize for that, but there's just a lot of work to do. We've canceled 2 of the scheduled meetings, so we're trying to keep them to 11.
You got 6 weeks off in the summer, so.
And I appreciate that too. I just can't do it Tuesday or Thursday evening. Unless I'm doing a daytime class, which that night I'm not, it's an evening class. I'm stuck. No, there's no one else to cover. So.
Thank you.
Any
Director.
other questions?
Thank you, Director.
welcome.
Yes,
Again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out.
I apologize. I had this, I don't know why it was on a different day on the calendar.
You're here.